And welcome into the MLB Hot Stove Daily late night edition. A little bit of activity around the sport of baseball today. We'll get into some of those headlines here shortly. We appreciate you taking the time. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe. Let's get into some of the headlines. As you guys know, it's going to be a pitching-heavy market this year. Juan Soto is going to dominate things on the offensive side of things. But we wanted to focus our discussion today on the pitching side, which has gotten a lot of headlines at the very top of the class and around Sasaki in particular. John Heyman hosted a live today on Bleacher Report, basically discussing the favorite being the LA Dodgers and that there are other teams interested, absolutely, but there's really nobody really considered a threat for him. So looking at the case for what or where he could ultimately go, he mentioned the Padres being the one team that he may ultimately consider. I do believe there are a couple other horses in this race. Can't rule out the Mets and he can't rule out the Rangers as far as I'm concerned, but I think the far and away leader has to be the LA Dodgers, and what a formidable group they certainly would be. But the Dodgers, that's not where things end for the Dodgers, at least today. They're at least checking in on some of the top free agent starting pitchers, namely Blake Snell, Corbin Burns, and Max Fried. That coming from Bob Nightingale. So we're seeing multiple sources out there showing that the Dodgers are targeting starting pitching here early in free agency. We saw the Yankees are targeting some bullpen help here early in free agency as well. So teams aren't necessarily sitting on their hands, twiddling their thumbs, wasting time until they get to the meetings. They're trying to get things done quickly, and no team is moving even quicker or quicker than the LA Angels. They've gotten 4 free agents already done this offseason. Great job by that team trying to get things done, and I really like what they've done. Now, am I saying they're going to win 80 games next year? I don't. I think they're probably going to finish at best in that 70 to 75 win category, but I really like what they've done the past year, year and a half. With Ron Washington being brought in, thought he was a great hire for a team that was not managed well, to put it mildly, with the handling of Shohei Ohtani and the decisions that went into acquiring talent to try to build around him and ultimately never working out. But they've done a nice job in the last year, year and a half, bringing in some young talent and still trying to acquire more. And now they've got some good veterans on that roster to where they at least should have a solid floor. And Ron Washington, if nothing else, is going to get them playing very good defensive baseball. So they're not going to be giving games away because of an error that cost them 3 runs. That really doesn't happen with a Ron Washington coach team. Now, of course, they're going to have the odd game where that happens. It's a 162 game season, but I really like where the Angels are headed. But let's focus a little bit more on the LA Dodgers here and their focus on starting pitching. Sasaki, imagine he goes there into that rotation. You're talking about a 1-2-3 that features Yamamoto, Glasnow, and Ohtani, assuming all those guys are healthy, which you really can't going through a 162 game season. You bring in Sasaki, who's still a young pitcher, going to have to get adjusted to the American style of ball. That doesn't mean they're going to try to add at least one more starter. It seems like they would like to do both Sasaki and bring in one more piece. Remember Ohtani's deal? The reason why he deferred all of that money was so they could add some more pieces here in free agency and add via trade as well. He doesn't want them just to sit on their hands and not spend the money that he's saving the Dodgers. He wants them to try to go not just for 1 championship, not just 2, not just 3. Can you see where I'm channeling this from? The Miami Heat, not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7 NBA championships. I think Ohtani and the Dodgers are viewing this as a golden opportunity here where some of the dominant teams that we've seen over the past 5-10 years are starting to take their lumps. Looking at the Houston Astros, looks like they're coming to the end of their winning cycle. Their championship window looks like it's getting close to closing if it hasn't already. Not saying they're not going to be a good team, but they're no longer going to be considered the heavy favorite out of the American League that could run away with the entire league and just win it at everything. Yankees, while they had a great run last year, didn't really go through anybody. Rangers last year, or a year before that, had a great run, but again, didn't really go through anybody. Orioles were supposed to be the team that's going to be there. We'll see if they ultimately get there by adding some free agent starting pitching. They have to retain Corbin Burns, and it sounds like they're already on the outside looking in on his free agency sweepstakes. That coming from John Heyman as well. But let's get back to the Dodgers here. They saved all that money with Shohei Ohtani. They could very well save even more by bringing in a top-flight, ace-level pitcher in Rohei Sasaki. It sounds like he is every bit as good as Yamamoto, or at least that's what the thought process is here. It may even get even better since he is so young. If they bring him in and then top it off with a Cy Young winning pitcher like Corbin Burns, or a guy that's a Cy Young candidate when healthy in Max Fried, wow, that rotation is going to be great 1 through 5. Now, of course, they'd still need some depth. That's been my issue the past 5 years now with the LA Dodgers. If they had all this great depth, with May and all the other striplings, those types of pitchers that kind of had the back end of that rotation to where they at least had some solid major league guys to step in. We saw they didn't really have that the last 3 or 4 years now. They had to go to more bullpen games. They even had to do that in the World Series a couple of times now. And they just need to get some solid starting pitchers in there. I'm not saying that they're going to go back and reinvent the wheel and go back to pitching, a starting pitcher 7 innings every single time out there in the postseason. But I am saying they would like to get at least 4, 5, 6 good innings before they have to turn it over the bullpen. Where right now they're kind of turning it over after 2, 3 innings and calling it good. I think they would rather get some of those dominant starting pitchers out there, solidify that rotation, then rebuild that bullpen. They're going to have to address that. Phillips is out there. Trinan is out there. I would not be surprised if they were a team that went out there and made a trade for Devin Williams. We spoke about that a few nights ago. If you want to check out that video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe and check out the video after we are done. But Devin Williams could be a name that's moved here at the winter meetings. I would be surprised if the Brewers brought back the same team they had last year. They never seemed to like to sit still or sit idly by. They had a good team last year, but I think they still realize that they're in a period of transition going with this younger core. They have a good offensive group. By moving off of Devin Williams, they could add 2, 3 more pieces that could be around for that entire run with that same core group, and so I think that's the route they will ultimately choose to go with, and we'll see what happens. But I think the Dodgers would be a great team for Devin Williams to go to. There are other relievers out there. Trinan could, of course, come back. Clay Holmes is a free agent now. Estevez has been connected to the Yankees, but he's been connected to the Dodgers in the past. There's so many arms out there. Tanner Scott I mentioned as well. There are so many relief arms that are out there. Kirby Yates is a free agent again. Nobody a year ago thought he was going to be the difference maker in a postseason series or on a very good bullpen situation. Well, the Rangers really didn't have much going for them all year long. He and David Robertson really were the 1-2 punch at the back end of their bullpen that at least got them the games that they needed out of the back end. Otherwise, it was kind of an up and down year once again for that Rangers bullpen. But what a great performance by Kirby Yates. He finished as an all MLB second team selection. That was announced, I believe, earlier today. He'd be another name to keep an eye on as possibly as eighth inning guy for the LA Dodgers. But let us know in the comments who you think ultimately goes to LA. Do they get Sasaki and another one of those guys? Do they miss out on both of those guys and just bring back, the retreads of Kershaw and Buehler and bring back a few other guys? But let us know in the comments where you see things going. But let's check in on some of the other headlines from around baseball. All right, now we mentioned that the Angels have done a little bit of work trying to get everything going for them. They brought in Travis d'Arnaud. Yesterday they got the arbitration deal done with Kingery. They brought in Kevin Newman as well. Low-cost budget contracts that are going to prove dividends for them defensively, and I think they'll prove to be very valuable for them going forward. They don't have a whole lot committed in free agency right now. I think d'Arnaud is going to help that pitching staff and O'Hoppe be able to develop more as a defensive guy behind the plate. O'Hoppe is a good bat for them. Bringing in d'Arnaud gives them a good 1-2 punch at that spot where they don't overuse him. O'Hoppe has had some injury issues the past couple of years, so those are things to kind of keep in mind. Other things that I wanted to point out, the Philadelphia Phillies are kind of in a period of transition as far as I'm concerned. This is a team that should have been in a World Series by now, especially with the core that they built. Their pitching staff was absolutely great in the first half. Kind of the wheels started to fall off the bus in the second half, and then we saw how the postseason went. But this is the second year in a row where they were expected to do very well, ultimately underperformed. Castellanos got much of the ire the first time this happened. He was much better this year, but I think he's the odd man out there if they're trying to try to change things up. Saves them a little bit of money if they can move off of him. There's not too many great offensive options out there in free agency. I could see a team going ahead and biting down on that entirety of that contract and still giving up some pieces to do so. Meanwhile, the Phillies could turn around and spend that money on a difference maker like a Juan Soto type, of course. They could go the pitching route, but I think they still need to address that bullpen. They had a couple of good middle relievers that made it to the All-Star team last year, ultimately failed them down the stretch a little bit here and there. But overall, this is a team that needs to shake things up. If you're looking at this team from the outside looking in, there's no reason why this team shouldn't have had more success. So that tells me there might be something that, maybe just mentally they need to get over a hurdle, whatever the case may be. By shaking things up there, maybe you get rid of that mental block saying, hey, even though Castellanos wasn't the problem, shaking things up, getting the team reinvigorated, giving them another, jolt of juice down the stretch might be what the doctor ordered here. Now, of course, they could wait to do that at the deadline, but it sounds like Dombrowski is not going to sit there and just let this free agency window come and go without making some significant changes to that roster. And I would keep my eyes peeled on Nick Castellanos. Now, like we mentioned, they could make a big offensive move. They could make even other, more drastic moves. I think Bohm would be a move that would be a little bit more drastic than a guy like Castellanos being moved off of. They're not going to move a guy like Bryce Harper. They're not going to move Aaron Nola. They're not going to move Zach Wheeler. Those guys are staying. Those are your cornerstones of your foundation, but of your team anyway. But they could definitely move around some pieces here to give them a little extra juice, shake things up a little bit, and just see if they can get this thing out of the mud. I mean, 2 straight postseasons where they've underperformed. Dombrowski isn't going to sit idly by and just wait for the next one to happen before he does something. He's going to act, and he's going to act in free agency. I would expect some big moves around the winter meetings, possibly even at the winter meeting. So they are in Dallas. I am looking into going there and possibly broadcasting live from the winter meetings at the Dallas, and I think it's the Hilton Anatole there in Dallas, I believe is where the winter meetings are being held. We will see if we can get there and see if we can even do some interviews live on camera for you guys. But Worst case scenario, if we end up having to be in our studio, we'll be here live with you guys all day long during the winter meetings. So make sure you join us as we break down all the latest from the winter meetings as they happen. One last thing before we hang things up tonight, I want to get into some trade possibilities out there. We touched on it a little bit the other day anyway. I want to get into some of your guys' ideas as far as what could happen here. We mentioned this one here, Luis Robert and Garrett Roche is one of the trades that was made by a commenter anyway. There was a little bit of news around the Garrett Crochet front, I guess you could say. With no surprise here is that many teams are checking in on Garrett Crochet. He is expected to be very available during this winter meetings area, and we could see him even be moved at the winter meetings. Now, what could it take? The White Sox obviously weren't bowled over at the trade deadline, and I would argue there were a couple of teams out there that were very willing to give up some significant pieces. Looking at the Baltimore Orioles, looking at the LA Dodgers, those teams ultimately didn't give up enough, or at least weren't willing to offer enough, according to the management group there with the Chicago White Sox. Now, I think this is a group that realized that they had who was the pitcher that they traded? I'm blanking on the name. They didn't get enough at the trade deadline. Who was it that they traded? I can't remember anyway. But they held one of their pitchers back last year at the trade deadline and ultimately traded him in the offseason. I think that's what we're going to see here once again for Garrett Crochet. I went to San Diego. I'm blanking on his name. I can see his face. Dylan Cease. Gosh, I don't know why I couldn't think of his name. Anyway, but they held on to him, and ultimately traded him. Winter meetings right before the season, those types of things. They didn't get the prices that they were looking for at the trade deadline, so they were able to wait until the offseason to get the move done. I think that's what they thought would happen here with Garrett Crochet. I think he's going to get a hefty price as far as the return package going back to the White Sox. Crochet has said he wants to get a long-term deal done, all those kinds of things before the trade. We'll see what happens there, but there's no shortage of teams looking for cost-effective, controllable starting pitching. Crochet really only has one great year under his belt as a starter. That would scare off, in my mind, some teams that are saying, hey, maybe injuries, maybe age, fluke season, whatever the case may be. Is this a commodity going forward? Or would I rather go for one of the guys that's in the free agent market, an Andrew Heaney, Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, all guys who are going to cost similar, maybe a little bit more money, and then maybe go to the top end of the market, an Eovaldi, a Burns, a Fried, something like that. So there's a lot of pitching on the market this year, not a lot of hitting. Luis Robert is expected to get a fine price in a trade, but you worry about the injury issues. And I think a team that's willing to take on the money, willing to give up the prospects, and is okay missing some time from Robert if he gets injured once again, is a team that could be a fit there. So teams that already have maybe a solid outfield, but looking for a guy who could push them over the top in a postseason series, a team that's, contending for an ALCS or an NLCS year after year might be a great fit there. Team like the Atlanta Braves could use him with the injury issues that they've had the last couple of years, especially with Acuna coming back. The Yankees seem to have a couple of spots out there. If they lose Soto, I think that'd be a great fit there. The Mets as well could use him. The Phillies, if they want to shake things up, they've been connected to him before. Astros have been connected to him as well. But that's one thing I'm keeping an eye on here as we get closer to the winter meetings, is what's going to happen with Garrett Crochet and what's going to happen with Luis Robert. I don't think either one of them get moved before Turkey Day. I think that's a little bit of a pipe dream. I think that one's going to happen around the winter meetings, more likely after, if I had to guess. We appreciate you guys joining us for this late night edition of the MLB Hot Stove Daily. We'll be live with you guys again tomorrow night. We'll check in on a few of the other teams, go around some of the other possibilities as to where players could sign, trade, etc. We've done the Dodgers and Rockies already. We'll continue our series with the NL West tomorrow night, and maybe go through a few more teams, try to cross off as many of those teams as we can, kind of see what fits, where players could go, those kinds of things. If you want to check out our thoughts on what the Dodgers could do in free agency or this offseason entirely, check out our video that we posted on Friday. And we'll see you guys tomorrow night. Y'all have a great evening. Appreciate you guys joining us. As always, hit that like and subscribe. Follow us over on X at UpsideSN. And y'all have a good one.